Tuesday night, Brisbane. The inspection runs late because the agent is showing the same one bedroom to 40 people in 15-minute blocks, and you're block 31. You stand in a hallway that smells like fresh paint over old carpet. Someone behind you is already filling out an application on their phone before they've seen the bathroom. Someone in front of you asks if pets are negotiable. The agent doesn't look up. You take photos you'll never look at again. You leave. Outside, you open Instagram while you wait for the bus. A friend from uni, same course, same graduation year, has just posted from a backyard. New house, settlement done. Another friend is tagging paint swatches for a reno. You scroll past a third one holding keys to a townhouse, captioned with 3 emojis you don't bother reading. You all started in roughly the same place. Same lecture halls, similar GPAs, similar starting salaries when you all got jobs around the same time. You put the phone away. The bus is late. You don't think about it again. Not yet. The thing that's strange isn't that some people earn more than others. You expected that. Different industries, different bosses, different luck with promotions. That's just how working life goes. What's strange is how it's playing out among people who, on paper, look almost identical. You think about your friend group. There's the one in healthcare, the one in marketing, the one in IT. Different fields, sure, but broadly comparable incomes. A few are earning more than you, a few are earning less. Nothing dramatic. And yet, one of them owns a place, has owned it for 2 years now. Talks about it casually, the way you'd talk about anything normal. Oh yeah, we're getting the bathroom retiled next month. Another one is on their 4th share house in 3 years because landlords keep selling up and new owners keep wanting the place back for themselves. Why does a $4,000 gap in annual salary not explain a gap this large in how 2 lives are unfolding? You don't have an answer. You file it under just how things go and move on with your week. Rent's due Thursday anyway, and that's a more immediate problem than a philosophical one. Then you notice something else, something quieter. The friend with the house, they haven't had a pay rise in over a year. Same job, same title, same income more or less as 18 months ago, but somehow they're not stuck the way you're stuck. When you ask, almost in passing, how things are going financially, they shrug and say something vague about the place going up a fair bit since they bought it. They don't sound excited. They sound like someone reporting the weather, like it's just a fact that happened to them, not something they did. You sit with that for a second. Their income didn't move. Their situation did. Meanwhile, your situation hasn't moved either, except in the other direction. Rent went up again this year. Not by a huge amount, but enough that the extra you'd hoped to put towards savings has basically evaporated into the increase. You're not behind, you're not ahead, you're exactly where you were, just paying more for it. 2 people, similar incomes, same 18 months. One person's financial position quietly expanded while they went about their normal life. The other person's financial position quietly contracted while they went about their normal life. Neither of them did anything unusual. Neither of them worked harder or smarter than the other in any way you could point to. The strange thing wasn't that one person earned more. The strange thing was that one person's balance sheet kept moving even when they weren't working. What is it exactly that's moving? Here's what's actually happening, and it has very little to do with effort, intelligence, or even income in the way most people assume. When your friend bought that 1-bedroom unit a few years back, they didn't pay for it with cash they'd saved. Almost nobody does. They borrowed most of it from a bank, a mortgage, and put down a deposit that was probably smaller than you'd think because that's how it works here. The bank fronted the rest, betting that the asset itself was solid enough to lend against. From that point on, 2 things started happening to your friend that don't happen to yours. First, every month part of their mortgage repayment isn't a cost, it's a transfer. A portion goes to the bank as interest, gone, same as your rent, but another portion reduces what they owe and increases what they actually own. Even if the property's value did absolutely nothing, your friend would be getting wealthier every single month automatically, just by living in their own home and making a payment they were going to have to make somewhere regardless. Second, and this is the part that doesn't show up anywhere obvious, the property itself is likely gone up in value. Not because your friend did anything. Brisbane's property market, like most of the country's, has spent years climbing. driven by population growth outpacing new housing supply, by interest rate movements, by all the structural stuff that happens regardless of any individual's actions. Let's put real numbers on it. A median detached house in Brisbane right now sits somewhere north of $900,000. An 8 to 10% deposit on that is roughly $80,000 to $90,000. But the growth doesn't apply to just that $80,000. It applies to the whole $900,000, the part your friend owns and the part the bank still owns. So, if the property goes up even 5% in a year, which is a modest year by recent Brisbane standards, that's $45,000 added to their position. On a deposit of $80,000, that's not a 5% return, that's closer to 50% in 1 year without lifting a finger. This is the part nobody explains properly because it sounds almost too simple. When you own an asset that's partly funded by debt and that asset goes up in value, the gain belongs entirely to you, not split with the bank. The bank just gets its loan back with interest. Everything above that is yours. Now, overlay this onto your situation. Your rent also goes up. But when your rent goes up, that money doesn't go anywhere good for you. It goes to your landlord, who, by the way, is very possibly riding the exact same wave your friend is riding, except their wave is partly funded by your rent. So here's the actual shape of it. It's not that one person has a better job. It's not that one person is smarter with money, though plenty of people will tell you it is, because that story is more comfortable than the alternative. The system isn't sorting people by income. It's sorting people by whether they're on the inside or the outside of an asset that the entire economy is structurally inclined to inflate. Owners are inside it. Their wealth grows with the system, often without them doing anything beyond what they were already doing, living somewhere, making a payment they couldn't avoid anyway. Renters are outside it. Their payments also flow towards that same growth, just not theirs. Same economy, same interest rate decisions from the Reserve Bank, the same population growth everyone reads about, but it produces two completely different outcomes depending on which group someone falls into, and which group you ended up in was often decided years ago by something as unglamorous as whether you happened to have a deposit together before prices moved again, whether your parents could help, whether you bought before or after a particular rate cycle. You reckon it should track effort. It doesn't. It tracks timing and access. And once that's set, the system just keeps doing what it does, to you or for you, depending on which group it already placed you in. Now think about what this actually does to two people's lives day to day, once you know to look for it. Your friend with the unit thinks about money differently than you do, not more, differently. Their concerns are things like what's happening to interest rates this quarter, because their repayment is tied to it, what their place might be worth if they ever wanted to borrow against it for something else, whether it's worth fixing the kitchen now or waiting, because either way, the asset underneath them is doing what it's doing. Your concerns are things like, will the lease be renewed? Will the rent go up again at renewal? And by how much? Because it almost always does. Whether you can afford to live near your job if it does. Whether you'll be one of 40 people at the next inspection too. These aren't just different financial situations. They're different psychological postures towards the future. Your friend can make 5-year plans that assume the ground underneath them. You're making 6-month plans that assume the ground might move. It changes timelines for things people used to take for granted as roughly synced with their peer group. When you might move in with a partner, when you might think about kids, when you might feel settled, whatever that means anymore. Not because of different values, because one person's financial foundation compounds quietly in the background of their life, and the other's doesn't, and everything else gets built on top of that difference, whether anyone intends it to or not. And here's the quiet part. It doesn't feel like a wealth gap from the inside. It feels like a vibe gap. A sense that some people you know are sorted and some aren't, without anyone being able to say exactly why. Because the why is boring. It's amortization schedules and capital growth, not anything anyone would put in a caption. The wealth gap becomes a lifestyle gap, what you can casually afford to do on a weekend, where you can afford to live, how far from the city you have to go. Then it becomes a psychological gap, what you allow yourself to plan for, what feels safe to want. Then, slowly, it becomes a social gap. Conversations where you used to have the same frame of reference start to diverge. Not dramatically, just enough that you notice it. The way you notice when a friend moves to a different time zone. They're still there, but something about the rhythm of staying in sync gets harder, and neither of you quite says why. Tuesday night, another inspection. Different suburb, same Brisbane, same 40 people in the same hallway smell of fresh paint over old carpet. You take the same photos, you leave the same way. Outside, you open Instagram again. Settlement photos. A housewarming this time from someone who used to split a flat with you back when none of this had started yet. Renovation progress shots. Before and after. Exposed brick. A caption about finally getting round to it. Same generation, same city, same broad economic conditions everyone's been living through. Same headlines, same interest rate announcements, same conversations about how stuffed the rental market is. But not the same experience of any of it. Not even close. You thought you were all just living your lives at slightly different speeds, the way people always do. Some ahead, some behind, everyone basically running the same race. You were never in the same race. You were in two of them. And somewhere back along the way, without a single dramatic moment you could point to, you found out which one you were in.